So the first thing I would identify about Black Panther is he, over the course of Captain America Civil War, learns to come to terms and overcome his own personal emotions. So, spoiler alert, by the way, if no one's seen the movie, but his father is blown up in an attack in the movie, and he has to come to terms with this, and he starts with rage and seeks revenge and goes after Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, who is presumed to be the one behind the attack. And he, just consumed with rage, goes after him and will not rest until he kills him as retribution for killing his father. And this is a big part of the movie, and it's only in the last act of the movie where his character development really finishes. His arc finishes where he shows mercy to Zemo, the man who ultimately killed his father, who he finds out. And he sees Captain America and Iron Man fighting each other, two friends in conflict over revenge that Tony feels for Captain America keeping his parents' murder from him. And he learns from these men and says and notices how he is done letting his love for revenge he says stop consuming him, but he learns from his emotions and he learns to forgive. An important value for a lot of religions, specifically Christianity, I'm thinking of forgiving people, because people do bad things, but there's only so much free will we have in our actions. So learning to forgive people for what they've done. It's not even forgiveness, it's learning that revenge actually won't make him feel better, and it won't bring his father back, and he will have to deal with that. But it's a first step of a very wise king. That. Anyway, to move on, the second point I'd like to make is very much leading on from the last point. Is the second point of Black Panther and the journey of man, becoming your father and becoming better. So after his father dies, and then this is going into Black Panther the movie now, he is set to be crowned as king, and he has to take up the mantle of the father. Very literally, in a sense, like in our lives, we don't always literally fill our father's shoes, but he literally does. He has to become the next king. So his father's death, and he literally means he has to fill his shoes and become his father to some degree. But over the movie, you learn that he has this idyllic view of his father that he tried to live up to originally. But then things transpire and you realise something his father did 20 years ago that was wrong has haunted them. They left Michael B. Jordan's character, killed the father and left him alone, the kid in America, and that kid grew up to be the villain, grew up to be Killmonger, and he questions his father in that decision, but he also questions the decision to isolate themselves away from the rest of the world, and particularly the rest of Africa, because Wakanda is a country that has much growth, much wealth and prosperity, yet they don't choose to help the rest of Africa in this sort of mythical Marvel universe. And he questions that decision as well and learns from his father. He becomes his father in a sense where he becomes king and he becomes the wise king archetype, but then he also leads on and becomes better than his father, and he learns from the mistakes of the last generation, which is, I feel like, a journey for men and a journey for women and people in general, that you have in our father, male and female and masculine and feminine role models, living up to those role models and also learning from the mistakes of our parents and learning from the mistakes of last generations is a big part of becoming adults in the new society and becoming better adults in every generation, and having our kids hopefully be better than us and their kids better than them, and learning each time from experience and from mistakes and successes. The third point I'd like to make about Black Panther is the courage this character shows. I mean, it's obviously a superhero movie, so courage is obviously something that is innate in them, but courage isn't something we talk about as a society enough, I don't think, anymore. I mean, we live in, especially in the West, we live in a society free of war to some degree. Like growing up in England or growing up in the States, in the 21st century, you're not going to be drafted into war. The vast majority of people will never see the battlefield. So the warrior archetypes and the warrior traits aren't fostered among young men, particularly as much as they used to be, which is understandable, but we can't, and that is potentially led to an epidemic of weaker men. And I think that's where YouTubers sort of, the crazy amount of how to become alpha videos have arisen, and people start watching them as a substitute for where they feel like they're lacking particular male role models, particularly some places where in the States where there's like 40% of household, or like a high percentage of households have single mothers, and I think that's potentially left good male role models in the United States and in England as well, an epidemic of single mothers. And having courage is one of the most important traits for life. Being able to face fear. I mean, this is like, courage isn't for the battlefield. Life's a battlefield, day to day, doing something you're worried about, or getting through the fear of discomfort, doing something, you know, every day we get up, we want to stay in bed, and we're lazy. If you get up and work, you're fighting against discomfort. That is the whole way against your life. You have to fight through discomfort and become mentally stronger. That's what courage is. Courage isn't stabbing someone and being a big Viking. Courage is doing something despite how you're feeling inside, and doing it anyway, and pushing through the uncomfortable feeling. Whether it's fear of whatever, you've fears of social fears, mental fears, phobias, all these different things. Fear of failure, where a lot of people don't go for their goals because of the fear of failure. So the courage to face your fears and do things despite the discomfort is one of the most important traits in life. And I will not, anyone worth their salt won't really disagree with that, because it's just plainly obvious. And the last thing I'd like to mention about Black Panther is he leads by example. He leads by example. Okay, if I go back to courage actually quickly, just to finish a point. If you see in the movie, in the first Black Panther movie, he gets stabbed and almost killed by Killmonger, thrown, and he obviously just survives. It kind of fits in the hero archetype quite well, but he then comes back, faces off Killmonger and the entire Wakandan army himself, faces them down and says, "I am not dead and I have not yielded, come finish me off." And obviously not fearing his death, doing what's right despite how he would have been feeling inside. Another one, particularly in Endgame and Infinity War, Thanos killed him in Infinity War. Spoiler alert, but when he clicked his fingers and turned into dust, he killed him. For then to Endgame, for him to come back and then fight Thanos' army, he's fighting the guy who just killed him. That's someone who's killed you. It's not obviously something people experience because they won't fight the guy who killed them, but he obviously knows how powerful this guy is because he literally just killed him. And yet, going up against him again with the courage and conviction for the right thing to do, and leading his army, it's courage. The last point I'd like to make is by leading by example. So he leads by example. He's always there leading the army. I mean, a lot of generals nowadays, they're back in the control rooms. They send, especially specifically in World War 1 and 2 in England and the United States. You know, the generals will be back, sending all the young men in to go die for them, not leading by example. But luckily, Black Panther, to the credit of him, he leads on the front. He leads on the front in the battle for Wakanda. As I said, him alone faces Killmonger, and he also in Infinity War is there leading from the front, leading Wakanda against Thanos' army. He had no idea who he was up against at all, but nonetheless, it was his duty to fight, and he fought and led from the front. And if anything, he actually sprung with Captain America and literally led for the front. He was the first one to engage. He was the first one to attack, and they literally followed him. They followed him. He led by example. And again in Endgame, he was the first one through the portal. He led his people, and he was ready to die with his people. He wouldn't put himself above them, where he led them in and he sat back from a distance as the strategist. He led by example, and he went with them and trusted his lives with the men he fought with. So that's leading by example. If you want to be a leader in the real world, you have to live what you preach, and you have to. Sometimes action speaks a lot louder than words. So just living your best life and living a life of competence and a life of responsibility and all these things. Having that as an example for people can actually help them a lot more than you telling them what you should do. So some people, having your life together gives the unconscious permission for other people to do the same. So leading by example is a really, really big, important thing. So yeah, that was the end of the video. It's a tribute to Chadwick Boseman. Another death. This reminds me of the death of Kobe Bryant earlier this year. It's one of those things, you see, I saw it on YouTube, because I don't really watch that much news, and just seeing it pop up. All of a sudden, I saw the thumbnail of him, and then 1970 whatever to 2020, and you think, oh no. And then it's gone. No Black Panther 2, no Black Panther 3. Kind of crazy, that. And he obviously had cancer, and I respect his privacy for not coming out with it. But that's been... Thank you for watching. Mark Hamer from Life Lessons. Please like, subscribe, and check out our podcast, the Life Lessons Podcast. And thank you very much for watching.